Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Manuel, and I'll be your host today. We're happy to have you here and talk about how CATIA with cloud services and the 3D Experience platform can help with revisions, engineering changes, and better collaboration. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Michael Davidson. Michael is a solution specialist for PLM marketing and learning at Bias 3D, and he has a degree in aerospace engineering. He has a lot of experience helping Dassault system customers with the 3D Experience platform, learning development in Innovia PLM analytics, and onboarding for new users. So thank you, Michael, for being here, and thank everyone for joining us today. And now I will hand it over to you, Michael.
All right, great. Thank you. So we will begin. This is the third webinar in a series, as Manuel mentioned, related to CATIA V5 and 3D Experience on the cloud. In previous webinars, we explored how CATIA V5 can connect to 3D Experience Cloud and start to enable teams to collaborate more effectively, access their design data in real time. And then today in this webinar is intended to kind of take that next step to move beyond your basic data management and start to introduce some more structured lifecycle management. So today I'll start with a bit of a quick refresher of what we've covered in previous webinars. After this, if you're interested and you'd missed those other ones, we could probably get you the link to the recordings if you're interested. I then will talk from more of a tool agnostic standpoint, why lifecycle management should matter, as well as also why you should be concerned about sharing CATIA or CAD data beyond just engineering and why that can be important. I'll then speak to the way Dassault Systems talks about sort of the digital transformation journey and how it would look like moving to the cloud and some of the different phases there, and particularly where we are when we're talking about this webinar. And then finally, the last few slides are going to be kind of a preview of what you could see on 3D Experience. So what some of the tools and widgets look like. And then we'll have kind of a short 5-ish minute video demo of using lifecycle management on the platform. So throughout today's session, we definitely encourage you to ask questions. If you think of anything and you don't want to forget it, feel free to just put it in the Q&A panel whenever you want. At the end of the session, we should have enough time and we'll hopefully be able to answer as many as we can. So with that, I'll just get started by going to the quick recap and refresher of what we talked about. So in the previous webinar, we called it the Get Connected webinar, where we were kind of looking at that first step of integrating CATIA V5 with 3D Experience and just sort of making that initial connection with cloud-based collaboration without changing some of your familiar workflows. We introduced some licensing terminology, so PCS, OC, and collaborative design for CATIA V5. Those are kind of some foundational tools and licensing that can give you a structured way to store and share your data and designs. And then we talked about approved file access and searching. So using 3D search as well as product structure explore widget that it can allow designers to quickly locate parts and assemblies. And we talked about simplifying data saving and versioning. So how CATIA V5 models can be saved directly into 3D Experience and tracking those versions. And then helping to ensure that your teams are accessing and working on the latest designs and not confused about what revision. And so all those points sort of lead up to, it kind of builds that foundation for lifecycle management. So once you have your data structured and collaboration in place, now you're kind of ready to start talking about, okay, well, how do we manage the design maturity, the revisions, and changes of your designs? And so that's kind of what this webinar, which we've titled Get Ready, will be speaking to. But before getting into kind of the tools itself, We have a few slides here. The first one being kind of why lifecycle management matters, to kind of speak to maybe the reality of wasting time or money. And on the slide here, it says, question for the audience: how often have you worked on the wrong version of a file? And you don't necessarily need to answer that or put it in chat or anything, but I would encourage you to just consider what that means, and either individually or in your team, how much time, or just on a daily basis, do you spend searching for the right file, verifying it's the latest version, or fixing any mistakes that are caused by that outdated information. And it could be anything from sending emails and waiting on responses, or trying to IM somebody to verify that they have the right file. Some things that kind of just seem like maybe small inconveniences, but we have some numbers here to speak to. The first few are on the slide here. These are just so numbers to kind of get you thinking about potentially how many parts and projects there could be, right? So, just so sometimes says like there could be 6 million parts or products. When you make a search, you're getting 30,000 results or something like that. How many approvals do you need in a design release? How many concurrent projects are happening, right? Just some things to kind of get you thinking about the daily struggle of a regular engineering team. Often involves wasting hours searching for those right files, looking at email threads, looking through shared drives, um, not having the visibility to the design maturity. So maybe you unknowingly start working on a model because you thought, VO3 was the latest one, but really somebody has already made a fourth version of it, or whatever. And then any errors that are caused to that confusion and maybe duplicated work, as well as also delayed approvals, slowing down a project. So maybe unclear about the workflow or where the bottleneck is, maybe miscommunications of, oh, I've already approved that, but it wasn't communicated, anything like that, right? And so we have some other numbers from some industry reports, as well as some PLM partners that we work with, where they estimate that 30% of an engineer's time can sometimes be wasted just by searching for data. And this can be broken down into anything of checking in and out content, collecting info from different tools, um, organizing it and getting it out to suppliers, having meetings and clarifications on the data, anything like that. Also, 48% of design projects can experience delays just due to mismanaged versions, which is quite a bit. I mean, they're quoting almost half of projects at some point, simply due to not knowing what version you're working from, can experience a delay. And then for some number values, the cost of working on a wrong revision can sometimes cost up to $10,000 per mistake. And in some industries like aerospace or A&D, it can be a much higher number there. And on average, a company per year will lose about 50,000 to 100,000 on just duplicated design efforts. So somebody maybe does some work, saves it locally, and then somebody else does the same work, right? So, just duplicating efforts can cost money. So it can get pretty significant, even if it feels like it's just something small inconvenience of your day-to-day life, right? And so the question is, how can we try to eliminate some of these efficiencies and ensure team members are accessing and looking at the right version? And really, that's kind of the objective and goal of what lifecycle management on 3D Experience is designed to solve. The other thing to consider is sharing your CAD data. And so traditionally, CAD data is usually locked within engineering teams, right? And when you need to share it, you're thinking about sharing static PDFs or drawings, screenshots, maybe email attachments. But if you've made that connection and you've established some collaboration on the platform and on the cloud, why stop there, and why limit that use? So when you have your data connected to the cloud, you can have read-write permissions and securely share your data with other departments in your business, and then you start to unlock some insights, and you enable them to be included in the product development lifecycle. And so on the screen here, we have a few examples of what that might mean of other departments that could be interested in the CAD data. Just to speak to a few of them. Um, so for examples, suppliers and manufacturing teams, instead of waiting for updated drawings or getting clarification on specifications, manufacturing or supplier teams can access the 3D model directly and then maybe reduce their errors in production or improve their lead time because they can see the context of the 3D model and maybe clarify questions or get answers quicker and in real time, as opposed to waiting for follow-ups. Compliance and quality teams, they can access the 3D model and get information related to compliance or quality insurance, or ensure that the designs are meeting the industry or safety standards. They can get that earlier in the product development life cycle. So you're not waiting until production and maybe past the point of no return and realizing there's an error, and then that becomes a very costly mistake. So they can get early in and see that data earlier. Costing and procurement teams, by analyzing the 3D models, they can get more accurate results on things like material requirements, weight estimations, cost projections, and then this can help them budget for the future and maybe even leverage it during supplier negotiations. And then finally, also sales and marketing teams. Um, Instead of relying on PowerPoint renderings or 2D snapshots of the model, they can use, there's a 3D play widget, which is like a lightweight view of the model. And they can use that to showcase and interact with the model, maybe make more engaging presentations or customer demos. And they can kind of show off the product in a better way versus just 2D screenshots and renderings. And then finally, before moving on from this slide, it is important to mention, because as you start talking about sharing data, the natural question and concern is, okay, well, how is my IP protected? Where is it going? Who's seeing the data? And so it's important to also touch on that 3D experience does allow for controlled permissions. So users are only seeing information that they're allowed to or it's relevant to their role. So you can have read-only access. So you're only viewing model, or so you can only view models, you can't edit them. Limit the data access to the models. So example of this might be the maturity state, where some users can only see content that's released. And then you can also collaborate with external partners. So through bookmarks and collaborative spaces, you can control who's able to see what data, and you can and you have control over that IP when providing access externally. And so all that to say is that kind of taking that next step is allowing the data to be accessible to other departments of the organization, just to kind of, that idea of breaking down the silos and being able to enable them to make better business data-driven decisions is the big point there. So the next couple slides is going to move to what we consider the digital transformation journey. And it's the way Dassault Systems will talk about this. And it's recognizing that moving to 3D experience isn't necessarily a sudden switch or something that you do overnight. It's a journey and it's a step-by-step approach. And we usually talk about it in different phases. And so this is what this webinar series has kind of been about. And in the previous one, we talked about the get connected phase of this journey, where we considered sort of linking CATIA v5 with 3D experience, enabling the basic collaboration without changing familiar workflows, a place where you can store and manage and retrieve your designs from the cloud, and then you're ensuring data consistency. So that single source of truth and that one point for the product. Now in this webinar, we're moving to that get connected phase. So this is the next one where now we're connected. Now the next step is to structure our data and processes, recognizing that, saying collaboration is a great buzzword, but it can be chaotic if it's just sort of, here's some tools and use them. You want kind of a structured approach to really effectively use and collaborate effectively, if you will. And so here we're going to talk about controlling the design maturity of models and products, managing the revisions, and then implementing change processes. And then from there, you kind of move through the next steps. So then the accelerate would be then bringing in other disciplines, simulation, manufacturing, and transform is that fully, leverage the platform and you have digital continuity across your business. And recognizing here that it is a step-by-step approach. So, it's kind of where we can help your business is where are you in this process? What do you need help with? And what are the components that will help you, get on the path to improving your workflows and improving collaboration. And so again, we're at the get ready phase. And so what does this really mean for you? And as I've kind of mentioned, it's the organizing, managing, and streamlining the way that you work with your data. So we talked about in previous webinars, the collaborative designer for CATIA V5, where you're integrating it with 3D experience. You're controlling you're controlling the life cycles and you're storing your information on the platform. And then you can share your CAD data with more people within the company. And you want to bring in the collaborative industry innovator role, which would be CSV, which is the licensing trigram package. Here you'd be talking about task management, so assigning and tracking design activities, lifecycle management, controlling the design maturity, preventing unauthorized changes of a product, and route management, which would be that automated approval process with a structured workflow. And finally, revision control, which is just ensuring that people are working on the latest information and the latest revision of the product. And you're not working through scattered emails or different tools. And then you'd also want to bring in the 3D swimmer role, which is the IFW. That's again, the licensing or the trigram package. This is sort of a foundation role for collaboration. It gives the visibility to engineering data while maintaining security. So being able to make 3D models accessible to non-CAD users, allowing visualization and markup features. That's where the 3D Play widget can come into play. And then dashboards can be built. So you can have these personalized views where you have project tracking, KPIs, data analytics to help you track and visualize the process and then help make data-driven decisions. And often these are all packaged together. So usually the CSV and the IFW is sort of packaged as a foundational licensing package to help you with your collaboration and your structured workflows. Another slide we have here to kind of reinforce a little bit of the roadmap and kind of give it a visualization is steps 1, 2, 3 here are what we've kind of talked about in the previous webinars, where you're connecting to V5, you're not disrupting or changing your workflows, you're searching and opening designs and not worried about duplicate files. Then you're using CATIA V5 and you're making your design changes and you're saving it, but it's saving it onto the platform, keeping track of that version history. Now, step 4 is where we're kind of adding a step now, where now your data is saved on the platform. Now we want to ensure that changes are tracked, reviewed, and approved appropriately. And so this is going to involve task management. So you're assigning and tracking updates, issue management, so you can log and escalate any design-related problems that occur, and then change actions, where you're managing the revision control and the changes in a structured way, and also in a traceable way. And so all these usually sort of play off of each other, where you can have issue management where you're creating an issue and then you're tracking the decision that's made on the issue that leads to a change action, and then you're tracking how that change was completed, who did it, and the decisions made along the way, and then how it is resolved. So you're kind of getting that traceability from issue identification all the way to the resolution. And that's stored and available on the platform for future reference. And then the next few steps would then be extending the capability. So then you're bringing in other disciplines. Maybe you're considering simulations or scenario testing to validate the performance of the product. You're bringing manufacturing and planning in to ensure the designs are ready for production. So you're building this roadmap, you're building towards kind of a complete ecosystem where you're using a unified tool and environment. And so now we're going to get into the tool a little bit. So the next few slides will preview some of the widgets and the tools that you would see on 3D Experience on the cloud. The first one here is related to Lifecycle, and it's called the Collaborative Lifecycle widget or app. And this is meant to introduce a structured and controlled approach to the design evolution of a product. And so it's providing these clear maturity states that kind of give rules to each stage of the product. So on the screenshot there, you have private, where the part is, that's the newly created part. It's usually only visible to the user that creates it. To in work, which indicates the design is being actively modified. To frozen, which is sort of under validation, it's pending a review, and you can't edit the product unless you demote it back to in work. Released, this is the approved part, it's ready for production, and you can't make any changes on it unless you have a new revision and change control on it. And then obsolete is your design is outdated and should no longer be used. Right, so it's giving this sort of structured approach that you can define the life cycle states, and you're not really reliant as much on email chains, manual file tracking, and having that confusion over what version or what state the product is when somebody's going in to take a look at it or edit it. And the value that you're bringing here is having fewer design errors. So you're hoping that the team's always working on the right file. Better traceability. So you're having that history of when a part was created, when work began on it, when it went to approval, how it was approved, when it was released, etc. And then faster approvals as well. Again, having it in the system, some of this can be automated, so you have these workflows and you're not waiting for confirmation. Once it's frozen, the appropriate reviewers can be notified and you're not waiting on that confirmation email thread, for example. Oh, yeah, and then there's, so then there's a few tools there too. With this widget, you can create new revisions, branches. You can compare different versions of the product, and we'll show that in the demo at the end here after a few slides. The next widget would be the collaborative task widget. This one's related to, in the last one you're thinking about from frozen to released, you have a review process. You might have tasks that are assigned. And so in engineering, this can be critical of, keeping track of who's working on what, following up on assignments or deadlines, and then also ensuring that there's deliverables and they're attached to the right tasks. And without a structured approach to this, it can sometimes become a little chaotic. So when you're reaching or you're getting closer to a milestone or a deadline, you're more prone to miscommunication as people start to, feel the pressure and they start sending emails and trying to get confirmation, and you might miss something, and you're just, again, prone to mistakes there, right? And so the collaborative tasks widget is intended to provide a place to organize your tasks in a more structured way. Here at work by, you can create a task and you can assign the responsibilities to team members, and then you can track the progress in real time. So you can move the task to in work, for example, and then you can make comments and track the progress as you go. And then at the end, you can attach a deliverable, and you can attach the actual CAD model that's being worked on because it's on the same platform and it's the same data. It's not a duplicate of the model or anything like that. It is the model. You can also attach reports or documents or anything supplemental to that. And then you have some accountability there. So you're seeing who is assigned to tasks and when it's due, and where the bottlenecks are and things like that. The value with this widget is related to having fewer delays. So you're not, again, waiting on email responses or confirmation or just missing assignments. You have that improved accountability. So you know who's working on what and where they're at and who needs help. And then it can be good for managers with that visibility. So they can be tracking the progress. Again, if they can see who needs help, or potentially if they have questions, it's an easy way to see who do I go to get clarification or answer this question that I have. And then with those tasks, the next one would be route management. So this is a tool, the route management widget, to recognize that throughout a process, whether it's a design review, change request, a final product release, that approval and that review is a critical step. And often it can be reliant on having, again, emails, meetings, meeting minutes, and they might be disconnected tools. This can all lead to delays in the decision making, waiting to see who was supposed to make the decision, miscommunication about that, and kind of what the status is. Somebody might say, oh, I approved that last week, but somebody else interpreted that as not being an approval, and so it's just been waiting around for a week, right? And not having the traceability. So if you're looking back on the history, you might not have it documented of who made that decision, when was it approved, and why was it approved, and that kind of information. And so the route management tool is one to help with that and give a structured approach to it. So normally there would be a creation of an approval route, where a designer can submit a part for approval, and they can use something like a route template that gives a defined workflow of what that approval needs to look like. And then it will be sent to with automatic notifications. So here in the screenshot, there's that design review as the first task. And so when it's initiated, that lead or that reviewer gets a notification of it, and then they can go to the task, they can view the data, they can view the model, they can do their review, and then they can add comments, approve or reject it. If it gets approved, then it automatically moves to the next stage. So here it then moves to the feasibility review, and then you have visibility into what's next. So then there's a marketing review next, for example. And so it's just giving that traceability of, every approval decision is recorded. You can refer back to it for compliance or auditing, and you also get a visualization of where potential bottlenecks may be. And also it's can be scaled to your business too. So you can use routes that are very, very simple at the start. You can have just sort of one reviewer and it's one task. And then as you start to grow and get more comfortable with it, you can start trying to have it match your business processes or more complex processes. So you can have multi-step approvals. So like you have something in parallel and then you have some tasks in series. You can have conditional workflows. So automatically setting up approvals or rejections based on some criteria, like risk level or cost or something like that. And then also bringing in external stakeholders. So maybe having suppliers or customers involved in the approval route, so they know where they're at and when they need to have their design reviews, and they have visibility to that as well. And so the value here is related to having faster approvals. So again, you're not waiting for responses and email chains and that kind of thing. You're having visibility of where the approval stands. So again, here we see that the design review has been completed and the feasibility review is still to be done. And that's kind of where the status is, right? Helping to reduce some of the manual work that might be done, some of that non-value added activity where you're needing to notify people yourself or follow up. This can happen automatically with the route. Improved compliance and traceability. So you've got this structured system and it's recorded there on the platform. So if you need to refer back to it ever, it's there on what the decisions that were made or why the decisions were made and what they were. And then the last widget here to show is the related to collaboration. This is the 3D play widget. So this is recognizing another one of those challenges where not everybody has access to CAD tools. And so manufacturing teams, suppliers, or managers, or even sales teams, they may need to review 3D models, but they don't have the full CATIA V5 software, and they might not have the expertise to navigate the interface, right? 3D play is this lightweight visualization of the model where a user can visualize it, explore it, interact with the 3D model, and they don't need that V5 license, and they don't necessarily need any specialized training. And so you can navigate a model, so you're rotating, pan, zooming in, you can see the model that way. You can view section views or exploded views of an assembly. You can take measurements, you can mark it up, you can make annotations, and then you can share that content across teams with other stakeholders. And so you're hopefully not relying on these static screenshots, and you can give more context into the 3D model and hopefully reducing miscommunications. And so the value with this widget is related, again, to faster decision makings. And so users can come in here, review the designs in real time, and helping to reduce that approval cycle. Not having that software limitation, so anybody with 3D experience, they can access and interact with the CAD model directly in their browser, and it's the up-to-date real-time version of the model. And improved communication. So again, reducing the misunderstandings by giving these 3D insights and not relying on a 2D screenshot where context might be lost and you might not really communicate exactly what you're trying to say. And so you're just improving that clarity with the 3D model. So next up, we've got a short video, about 4 minutes, I believe. There's not any audio to it, so I'm just going to play it and then I'll speak to it. It's just kind of meant to demonstrate a very simple workflow related to lifecycle management. And so it's going to begin in CATIA V5. And so you're here and you're saving your data, if it's playing. There we go. So you're in CATIA V5 and you can save your data and then it goes to the platform. When you're in the platform, you can use something like bookmarks, and this gives a structured approach to, you can control the access of who has access to what level of folder structure. And then you can drag the model and you can put it right on, this is the 3D play widget. And so then a user can navigate this model and view it in this lightweight widget. If you have the right permissions, so an engineer, they can make some attribute adjustments here in the platform. So here they're adding an enterprise item number. And then when they start their work, if they want to track and manage the assignments, we're going to show the collaborative tasks widget. Where we're creating a task, we're adding a description. You can add some other attributes, and then we're going to search for the model and add it as an attachment. And this is the actual model on the platform. It's not a duplication or anything like that. They could add an assignee. They could add any sort of supplemental documents or any other things they need for context, create the task, and they can move it to do. If we go to the assignees account, we'll see that they get a notification that they've been assigned a task. They can open up that task, they see the description, they see all the information that was added, and they see that model that was attached. They want to start work, so they move it to in work, and then we're gonna use the lifecycle or the collaborative lifecycle widget to kind of demonstrate some of the maturity states. So here we've got revision 1 of the model. Let's say it's released. We want to make an update, so we're going to create a new revision, add some comment about what we're doing, and now we're going to have revision 2, and it's going to be created as an in-work model. Now we can open it. We can open it directly back into CATIA V5. So now the part's going to open in V5, and now we're back to our familiar interface and the workflows that we know, and we can make any updates that we need to make here. So in this example, we'll just sort of changing the tread pattern of the tire. Once we're happy with it, you save it, and it saves back to 3D Experience. So then we'll return to 3D Experience, and with a refresh, we can then visualize and look at the changes. So here we've got revision 1 on the 3D Play widget. We're going to drag revision 2, open it up on 3D Play, and we can see the updated model here. We can also use some compare functionality. So here we're going to click compare, and then we're going to select the revisions we want to see. And then we'll see here, I believe orange is the revision 1 and blue is the revision 2. So you can see the different properties. You can use the 3D Play and you can visualize what those changes were between the two revisions. Once we're happy and we've made our changes and we're ready for the approval process, we're going to promote the part to frozen. Now it's ready for review. We're going to go back to our task. We can add some comments here about what was done. We can also add, again, any documents we need for context. And then we're going to add the deliverable itself. And here on the platform, we can just take revision 2 and we can drag and drop it. And now it's attached as a deliverable to the task. And then we move the task to in approval. And the manager or the lead or whoever's assigned as the approver is going to get that notification. They can go to the task. They can see the details, the comments of what was done. They can interact with it, make any comments. They can view the deliverable. And here they're just going to preview it with 3D Play. They see it's the second revision. And then they can navigate this way. They can do their design review, whatever they need to do here. When they're happy with it, they can go ahead and now it can be released. And now you have revision 2 that's been released. And then you can close the loop and just complete that task to say it's done. And so the idea there is that, it's important to note the traceability of that, right? So throughout the process from creating the new revision all the way to the end, it's all documented on the platform and it's all connected to that CAD model, right? So we know when the new revision was created, who worked on it, what they did, who approved it, when it was approved, and when it was released, right? So we have that traceability of the updates. And so moving to the next slide, we just have, so now that we've seen a few kind of a preview into what 3D Experience can do, we have a slide here just on what we see some best practices when people start adopting 3D Experience on the cloud and using the lifecycle management. What are some of the practices that they're doing? And the first is eliminating uncontrolled file copies. And so this is that idea of the single source of truth, eliminating duplicate files or in shared drives. If somebody makes an update, saves it locally, and then is sick or goes on vacation or something like that, you not losing that. You have that single source on the platform. The second is leveraging the lifecycle statuses and change actions. So you're using the maturity states of in work and frozen and released to ensure that only valid changes are made and people are only updating and working on parts at the appropriate time. Maintaining a clear audit trail. So by tracking the designs or tracking the product development and the approval lifecycle, when the changes are made, who's making them, and you have all of that documented for compliance and quality assurance and just future reference, preventing design errors. Having better enabling real-time collaboration, so moving beyond those email workflows, not relying as much on spreadsheets and meetings and that kind of thing, having that task management where you've got that accountability and clear visualization of who's doing what. And then reducing design errors and rework. So recognizing that companies that use PLM tools often see up to 40% fewer design errors, get to the market faster. And if you're moving to a PLM on the cloud solution with 3D Experience, you're on the same place where V5 data can be. So your CAD and your PLM workflows are now unified, and you can manage your designs and BOMs in that one platform, ensuring your data consistency, and you're not manually syncing between different tools of PLM and CAD. And then hopefully with your CAD models linked directly to your BOM, that you're avoiding any mismatches or outdated data. So the big takeaways in general for this whole webinar really is the idea of preventing errors and version conflicts. So centralizing your data, accelerating your product development. So getting that structured approach to the way that you approve things and have some automation. And then improving your cross-team collaboration. So making your data accessible in real time and enabling other departments to make data-driven decisions and identify issues early on in the life cycle, for example. So, oh yeah, well, sorry, there was one more business best practice, the automated life cycle transitions. So you can also set rules for automatic status of approvals or reviews. And so I've seen some customers where they have from frozen to released, they have rules where you need a change action. And so attached to that change action, you have a route template. And so you have the appropriate approval groups that it needs to go through. When that change is completed, the product then automatically goes from frozen to released. So you can have some automation set up in the workflows. When something's approved, it just releases the product. And so with that, I'm just going to check the time. And then we have just one more slide of just a publicly available customer or Dassault customer success story. Nita Auto, which is a luxury EV company. They were looking to reduce their R&D cycle time to stay competitive. And they wanted to control the cost by minimizing their design and system integration issues. And then also just establish and enable better collaboration internally and then among their suppliers. And they looked to 3D Experience to integrate their design, engineering, and manufacturing process. And they were able to utilize some early digital mock-ups and have other teams come in and view the data, and they were able to have some early issue detection and be able to reduce the rework. So they were able to have that real-time collaboration among their teams and get better decision making. And they found that they could accelerate their R&D cycle from 8 to 6 months, some cost savings of 20% reduction in design issues, which estimates that about 1.3 million euros in savings. And so we finished with this just to, at the start, I talked a little bit about maybe things that were seen as minor inconvenience, day-to-day stuff of, figuring out what version you're using. But all of that can really add up throughout a project. And at the end, there's the potential that there could be some real cost savings by having a structured approach to the way that you review designs and manage the life cycle of a product. And so with that, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to thank everybody that's joined today. I really appreciate listening. This is, as we mentioned up the top, this is the third of 5. And so the next one's going to start talking a bit more about expanding the disciplines and bringing other operations into the platform. If you're interested in that, you can look up VIAS 3D, so VIAS 3D on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place. You'll be able to see updates on the next webinars and register for them that way. But with that, we can just open it up to questions. Do we have anything in the chat, Manuel?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael, for this great session and all of these insights. Yeah, it seems like we have a couple of questions right here. So let me take a look. The first question we have is, what happened to previous revisions when a new revision is created in 3D Experience?
So, I mean, really nothing really happens to the previous reversions. They stay on the platform. And so you have that history and that traceability, right? So you create a new revision, that old revision is going to stay on the platform and be associated to the new one. But then when you're in a search and you're looking up a product, it's going to direct users to that latest revision. So you're making it accessible to users to see the latest one, but you have the history of the previous ones. So it kind of just stays on the platform, I suppose, if that answers it.
All right, thank you so much, Michael. And we have another question here is, can a user revert to an earlier version if a mistake is found in the latest version?
Yeah, so like going back to, yeah. So it's an interesting one because I was actually talking about that recently with someone, and it's not necessarily reverting back, because you don't, again, I guess it's the traceability. You don't want to lose that history. You want that history of what happened, of having that revision. So you don't necessarily revert back, but you can have that version become obsolete, and then you can create a new branch from the revision and continue the design from there, I suppose. So yeah, hopefully that answers it, but it's not necessarily just reverting back. It's you want to keep that history again. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good
Great.
question.
Thank you so much, Michael. Seems like we don't have no more further questions. So that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Again, thank you so much, Michael, for joining us and sharing your knowledge with all of us. Thank you for all of you for attending to this session. Before we finish, would you like to say something else, Michael?
No, I appreciate everybody joining today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yeah, have a great day, and we hope to see you in the next session.